Good morning, everyone. This is Paul, and as crazy as this sounds, because I'm a total night owl, I just rebeat The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds a few minutes ago, and that game is utterly phenomenal. I would consider it set the standard for handheld games as much as Ocarina of Time set the standard for 3D games. Like, it's literally that good. And to think that it's based on an older game, that makes it even scarier. But unlike most of my video game reviews, I'm going to be reviewing it from a Catholic point of view first, then review the actual game. Spoiler alert, it's amazing. Anyway, so most of the major story takes place at the middle and at the very end of the game, so if those of you who are panicking about spoilers, this game's not really that heavy on story, so it shouldn't really mesmerize you. I admit it didn't mesmerize me when I first played it. I thought this was one of the lamest Zelda stories. Until I beat it tonight, and that got me thinking about the virtues, because I would recommend watching a video by a subscriber known as That Catholic Gamer Dude. I'm also subscribed to him, so you could look him up that way. He made a video called What Would Link Do?, where he talked about the virtues of the Triforce pieces and how Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf exemplified each of those pieces, for better or for worse. But then that got me thinking that in A Link Between Worlds, Lorule, which is like the dark world of that game, had a Triforce, albeit an upside down one. And Hilda revealed that the Triforce had different virtues than her own Triforce. So that got me thinking, well, okay, if they don't have power, wisdom, and courage, then what would they have? And so I racked my brains trying to think, okay, what would 3 other virtues be that caused such commotion and chaos that Triforce ended up being destroyed? I'm going to guess it's probably faith, hope, and love, because those are 3, I believe they're called cardinal virtues in the Catholic faith. And in case you're wondering now, Paul, these are Japanese people. Did they really intend for Zelda to be a Christian series? Yes. The original religion of the Zelda series was indeed Christianity, because you have a cross on Link's shield in his earliest designs. You can even see it in the game, as pixelated as it was. You could also get a cross as an item in one of the first 2. Plus, the Book of Medora in A Link to the Past was originally translated as the Bible. Plus, the sanctuary in which Zelda hides is very obviously some type of church with a priest or a minister, one of the 2. So if A Link Between Worlds is the sequel to A Link to the Past, and there's still a sanctuary in that game, it would stand to reason that a sequel is going to be based on the same religion as its predecessor. So if A Link to the Past was strongly rooted in Christianity, then it stands to reason that Christianity was the central focus of the narrative this time around. So if Link, Zelda, and Ganondorf were each given pieces of the Triforce, for better or for worse, then one can assume that Ravio, Hilda, and Yuga were also possessors of pieces of the Loforce, I'll just call it for differentiation purposes. Again, this is only a guess, because the story never actually mentions that the 3 of them are divinely chosen by any means. I mean, the closest thing we get is that Hilda is the princess of Lorule. I mean, that's about as basic as you can get. So, we are going to assume that the 3 virtues in the Loforce are faith, hope, and love. I might have already said that. Anyway, who were they given to? Ravio was given the Loforce of hope. The reason why was because Ravio admitted he did not have the courage to stand up to Hilda and Yuga when he found out of their schemes to steal the Triforce from Hyrule. So he fled to Hyrule in the hopes that he could meet a genuine hero. And hope is that virtue where we know that there's something greater out there, even if we don't have conclusive proof, or even if, like, we don't know how to prove it. We just sort of know, like we say, we hope that we'll attain eternal salvation. it's not something we necessarily can prove. Like, I'm pretty sure there are all of us that say, like, I'm the worst of sinners, even after going to reconciliation and whatnot. And Ravio displayed a good show of hope when he happened to find the hero of Hyrule, and then he exemplified that hero's Triforce piece when he found him. So if Link was the possessor of the Triforce of Courage, Ravio was given courage by observing what Link was doing. Because, put it into perspective, Ravio was the owner of the item shop, or Link's house, more like, that he kind of took over. So Ravio knew the type of adventures Link could get into just by looking at his inventory. There's also a subtle reference to Majora's Mask if you look at his diary, so it's possible that Ravio was perhaps a hero in his old days, maybe? So, in other words, at the very end of the game, Ravio stands in the way between Hilda and Link and uses his courage to convince her not to resort to the violence and chaos that caused their original Loforce to be destroyed. Now let's look at Princess Hilda. She obviously possesses the Triforce, or the Loforce of faith. Now, faith is putting your belief in something that can't be seen. So, for example, our God, he's omnipotent, but it's not like I can just reach out and touch him, unless I'm talking about the Eucharist. But even then, we're not seeing God completely as he is. So Hilda, even before she has seen Princess Zelda for herself, she knows about Hyrule and she knows about the stability of their Triforce. So she's putting a lot of faith and a lot of emphasis on this plan going well. She also wants what's best for her kingdom, so she's using her faith as a princess. You could say the title of princess is her faith, kind of like how I identify myself as a Catholic. That is my faith. I make my decisions based on what my Catholic faith is telling me. So we could say she'll have the faith of princess. And her faith is telling her, I need some form of orderly object, now that ours is destroyed and Lorule's all destroyed. So when Hilda meets Zelda, Hilda begins to realize that she was going about her faith the wrong way. She needs to approach it more like Zelda, who possesses the Triforce of Wisdom, where Zelda does not resort to destruction. Instead, Zelda makes a wish on the Triforce to restore Lorule's Loforce. But before doing so, Hilda uses Ravio's bracelet to be able to send Link and Zelda back to their world, with the faith that because Link and Zelda possess such good virtues, they will do what is best. So again, Hilda, after meeting Zelda, takes on her characteristics. Now let's look at Yuga, which admittedly you're probably gagging right now if some of you haven't already stopped this video like 8 minutes ago. Yuga was probably given the Loforce of love, and admittedly that seems like such a stretch because, like, love, seriously? That's like, love is what sent Jesus to the cross. He sacrificed himself for the sake of the world. But, as we demonstrated with Ganondorf, Ganondorf had the Triforce of power. Power is not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the President of the United States needs to have power to run the country. But Ganondorf abused his power, so he turned something that could be good, the goddesses are good, and used it for evil. In the same way, Yuga has more of like a lust than a love. Yuga is obsessed with beauty. He also is very obsessed with, himself. So Yuga traps the 7 sages in paintings because he loves the beauty. And then after that, he revives Ganondorf so that he can possess the Triforce of Power. And you'll notice that there's a complete change in demeanor of Yuga after he revives Ganondorf and before that when he's still scheming to capture the sages. Yuga comes across as kind of like a Girahim figure, like very narcissistic, very almost gay, I guess, for lack of a better word. And like all he cares about is beauty, and he considers Link a detestable worm that is like a scribble. So he basically hates Link because, he's not what he loves. He doesn't love something that's not beautiful. But after Yuga and Ganondorf merge, I like to call them Yugadorf at that point in the storyline, all of a sudden Yuga's demeanor completely changes. When Hilda orders Yuga to defeat Link in the final battle, Yuga fails. And then Hilda says, Yuga, I order you to take his Triforce of Courage. Yuga says, foolish girl, do you really think that I want to go along with your plan? I will take your Triforce, and then I shall have the power to rule Lorule. So essentially, Yuga took on Ganondorf's evil tendencies. So in other words, each of the three virtues of the Triforce and the three virtues of the Loforce, assuming my theory is correct, at first contradicted each other, but in a sense they also balanced each other out, for better or for worse, as we said. So Yuga and Ganondorf both chose to take something that is initially good and turn it into something bad. But in the same way, Link and Ravio, and Hilda and Zelda respectively, used each other's virtues as like stepping stones and learning experiences. And as for the reason the Loforce was destroyed, I'm unsure at present if there's any Catholic symbolism there, but it's possible that that could be a reference to Jesus Christ's crucifixion. I mean, if you think about it, the Triforce is upside down, sort of symbolizing like an inverse of what the goddesses were, because the pieces of the Triforce represented the different like wills of the goddesses. Din was the goddess of power, Faror the goddess of wisdom, Nehru the goddess of courage, or something like that. And if the Triforce is upside down, that means like the virtues are sort of flipped. Just like Jesus, he knew no sin, he was perfect, but yet he was given a criminal's punishment. It is said that Lorule was filled with chaos and violence and terror, and it said that once the Loforce was destroyed, Lorule was split apart. And if you think about it, that's exactly what happened when Jesus died on the cross. It said there was a huge earthquake, and the veil of the temple is torn in two. It's not a perfect analogy. Like I said, I just came up with this a few minutes ago. But it's not impossible that this could work. Because, like I said, A Link to the Past was based on Christianity. It's not a stretch to say that they went back to that for A Link Between Worlds. So you cannot rule it out as possible. But seeing as A Link Between Worlds has a pretty bare bones story, there's not really much more I can say. So hopefully you'll enjoy my upcoming review where I'll talk about the game in and of itself. And until I'm able to broadcast my next video, as I always say, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.